All right, I think we are officially live. Jumping into our very first episode of the Art of MVP Development.
Yes.
Myself and Mac, we are here again with yet a new venture. So I'm gonna let you kick it off, Mac, and swap
Yeah.
over my screens and stuff so I got full control.
Yeah, no worries. So, first, welcome to the Art of MVP. So, this podcast is really focused on all things that has to do with building your minimal viable product, aka MVP. And the main reason why we wanted to do this podcast is two things. One is that we have a book coming out called The Art of MVP Development. So a little shameless plug. And secondly, and probably the most important thing is that Jessica and I have been working in this space for a while now. I don't even know how long, but it's been a
And
while.
it's pushing 3 years at least since the Tech Time program started.
Yeah, so about that time, thank you, Jessica. And we really wanted to share some of the lessons learned, some of the stories, and a lot of these stories are funny actually, and then a lot of the experiences that hopefully you can take away from this podcast that can help steer you away from the pitfalls of when you're building your MVP, and hopefully give you some insight from other founders that have we worked with that have built MVPs that in some cases they worked out well for them, and but in a lot of cases it didn't. And then there's some reasons why that it wasn't as successful. So that's what this podcast is about. Did I leave anything out, Jessica?
No, I think you kind of hit all the spots, and we can kind of get into it later. But both of us have, even though we've been partnering on a lot of things and we've worked in the same space, I think we've also been able to kind of niche down into very particular areas that we specialize in at the moment. So you being more so on the coaching side with founders, and me being more so on the training and technical side with the MVP developers that are wanting to get into this work as well. So there's just a lot of opportunities I think we have to kind of dive into some topics that maybe are less covered in the space right now. And I get a lot of questions. I always get a lot of questions about like what is MVP anytime I bring up the work that we've been doing in other technical spaces and things like that. So I just think this will be a fun show to run, at least for the time being, so that we can kind of do a deeper dive on some of the topics we don't get to cover as much in other spaces.
I agree. I mean, I think the one of the things that so just jumping right into it, what we're just coming off of right now is working on the Detroit Hacker House. So this is where we had founders in the house with the whole focus for us at least. Well, the whole focus is for them to actually uh, either enhance their existing MVP or to create a MVP. And the purpose of that was that for them to figure out, is there a product market fit? Do people really want their product? All those things that go into figuring out, is this an actual viable business? And the best way of figuring that out is putting the product in front of them. So we just coming off of that. And I'll tell you, Jessica, that was a very it was very interesting experience. I don't know if interesting is the right word. I think that we learned that, at least I learned. I'll speak for myself. I don't know. You'll probably speak to what you're saying. Um, I think I've learned that everybody doesn't see the value of a MVP like we do. And I think
Yeah.
that is that was one thing that I think we have to um really figure out how to um next time we run this the hacker house. And I think in general, I think we need to explain people how we see the MVP falling into their strategy for building their company. And maybe I'm just looking at it too simplistic. I just want to actually help them build something quickly so that they can take it to the market and test it and validate that it's actually something that people want.
Right.
I Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it more complicated than that. I think what we found is that people don't they've been watching too much TV. Like, that Silicon Valley
Just
show.
coming from
uh,
different markets and coming from different parts of the country, like everybody's perspective is very different on what they truly think it takes to get a product out there. And then I guess also for context, right, we're right now a little bit more VC focused. So we're intending to like set companies up to be successful in raising their first round ultimately, honestly, because we're everybody we had was like pre-seed, right? So um yeah, if you
yeah.
like you said, you watching TV and you see like, just like this fantasized world of, yeah, I have an idea and somebody's gonna give me like millions and millions of dollars for something I wrote on the back of a napkin. But we're in the Midwest where it's just like, no,
Yeah,
no,
it don't work like that. And
it's
even
not.
even the people that are in the valley, I mean, there's so many companies that don't get a check written immediately.
Mhm.
We hear about the ones that do, but they're far and in between. And I think for me, I think you said it nicely. I think people come from different perspectives, um, and different viewpoints. So they don't see MVP the same. And I think for me, that was the most frustrating thing because I think people are like, well, I talked to this VC and they said they like my idea. And, I think I got a check coming, or I think I'm going to be able to raise funds. And I'm like, how long has this been going on? And they're like, well, for the last couple of years, I've been, talking to VCs, or the last,
Yeah, yeah.
3 months, 4 months.
Mhm.
I'm like, yo, if they really believed in your idea, they would write you a check. I
Yeah.
mean, and you wouldn't be living in a hacker house
Yeah.
trying to and I think a lot of people's perspectives are like, hey, we're gonna live in a hacker house and like it's a cool thing, like something I can put on my resume and say, hey, I lived in a hacker house. And I think when they met me and you, I think that was the shocker. And we
Yeah.
actually have a very rigid approach. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
Maybe am I I guess articulating this the way you see it as well, or what do you how did you see it?
I did see it the same way, but I just think like for me, my mindset was like, I don't know exactly how people are gonna take the process, with it being pilot and everything, but I do feel like we took it a little bit more for granted of people having buy-in to the actual process that we were going about. And also really just understanding like there is a reason why we are doing this, right? So as you mentioned, a lot of people I was more so surprised by how counterproductive almost some of that quote unquote good feedback from VCs can be, because it's misleading in a lot of ways. And one of the things I think we need a lot more of is just really that truly that founder education so that they can understand, right? Because a lot of them are were saying, "Oh, I'm getting this good feedback." They keep saying I'm doing a good thing, and that's like a vanity metric. Like them saying it's good, this is good, this sounds great. That's nothing. Like, did they write a check though? That's the most important part. If they're not writing a check, then obviously it's not that good. Or there's something that they still want to know. And it was almost like when you see the VC saying, "Hey, that sounds cool," people are extrapolating that into, oh, they're going to invest in me. And that's just not the case.
Right. And the way I look at it is that they're going to invest in me. I don't necessarily need to put my money and energy
Mhm.
into building a MVP. And maybe a lot of them, a couple of them in our cohort had MVPs, but they were like, I don't need to develop it anymore. They said that it was good and that, I have a check coming. And that was the thing that I think that was the thing that frustrates me the most. But I think you say things very eloquently. I look at things like this, very simple. It's very similar to when I was younger and I'd be like, hey, I talked to a girl and the girl's like, "Hey, you're cute." I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "What's up?" You know,
Yeah, oh, she definitely
yeah.
she definitely
She
feeling
did.
me. It's like she
Yeah,
was
she
just trying to
definitely.
get to the next
She
block on
playing
the
hard to
street.
get.
She
She playing
was
hard to get. She playing hard to get, Jessica. And then I
meanwhile, I'm like,
did.
"Uh-huh, yep, speed walking, never gonna see that person again, just cordial to end the conversation."
Exactly. So, and I think that's to your point. That's how I look at it. Is like
I
they
like that
are.
analogy though, because you brought that up recently. I was like, "That is yes, it is that."
Yeah, and the funny thing is, we talked to some of these investors, and they're like, yo, we don't want to like be rude to them because they may be like down the road, they may have something and they'll remember, and they may not, we may not be able to get on a deal, or they'll tell somebody that we're so like it is exactly that, because that's what, from what I understand, I'm not a girl, but girls are like, I don't really want to like,
Yeah, you're
like
not trying
let
to,
them down hard,
necessarily piss somebody off while you're walking down the street. It's a complete stranger saying, "I'm gonna be
right?
cordial and everything and try to get to my distance," but I'm not trying to
Yeah.
talk to every person that walks by, and VCs are very much in that boat because they're getting well, we were talking. I think I've been excited that we've been, making more connections and having more partnerships in the VC space. So, and we were talking in one of the conversations, and it was like, you might see 100 to 150 deals coming across the table, and then they have to do like really, really thorough due diligence on like all of these different businesses that are coming at them to even vet if it's a good idea or not. So um yeah, you're gonna be polite and cordial to people and encourage them. And even if you might like what they're talking about or what they're doing, it's like, okay, thumbs up. But in that early stage, it's like they don't even almost have the capacity to sit back and say, okay, so here is like all the other things that you need to do in the meantime in order to get that. It'll just be like, hey, looks good, maybe we can follow up later, and they'll almost like passively keep up with the progress, but that does not mean that automatically a check is going to come.
Yeah. So I mean, let's just dive into a little bit. When we do the MVP process, it is really around looking at the core, what I call high value use cases.
Hmm.
Again, analogy from what was the guy named Kevin? Like the high value man, the Kevin guy. I forget his name, but who's that? I mean, I know you're gonna make me think about what his name is.
I'll make it. You think about it. You brought
Kevin.
it up about high value man.
Uh
I'm googling it for.
Kevin Samuels. Like, it's just like
Okay.
the we yeah. I don't know if you know about him or not, but he used to always talk about the high value man. I equate this again. This is another analogy to dating, right? Is that
But it
I
is
really are
like it
looking
is a
at
lot like dating when it
it
comes to
is,
VCs.
and it's like, well, it is, but in this case, I'm like, who we need to figure out the high value use case
Yep.
that you need to work on. You shouldn't be building a MVP on things that are just nice to haves, or you think it would be nice for them to be able to do this. I heard recently, and and me and you are working with Tech Town. We recently worked with some founders, and I kind of heard their report out, and they're like, it would be nice that they'll be able to have this chat feature. And I was like, well, that's great, but is that going to help you generate revenue? Is people are going to be like, oh, they don't have a chat feature, so we're not going to use this. I mean, unless the customer or proposed customer or prospect is going to tell you that, I don't think that's something that you need to focus on. And likewise, when we're working with these founders here, we're really trying to press them on, like, what is the thing that your customer really needs? And I don't know. I
Well,
don't know how you feel about that. So go
I
ahead.
mean, that's the key that I think a lot of people aren't necessarily really owning. It's not just about, okay, so you get this idea and you have this like perfect vision of it in your head of what all it could be. But most of the time, in my experience, right, because I've done a lot of work as a developer for founders that, we need to build out their MVPs. And when they get ideas, they get all these fancy ideas. And most of it, literally, if I can ask them, like, how is that going to affect their customer? What did their customer say? They're not going to have an answer for me. And so that's even one of those, core fundamentals. I think in Tech Town, it's a little bit different because they go through formal discovery typically by the time they get to the MVP program. But definitely in the Hacker House, we are very interested in building, but you really need to have that customer discovery component so that you, even if the person is veering off course, we can continue to go back to that conversation.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. So just to be clear, what Jeseekia's talking about, in the Hacker House, we are like from day one, we are expecting that you understand who your customer is. You should not be joining the Hacker House and be like, you know what, I don't know who my customer is exactly. I know that they may like this. No, it should be
All
like
residents in
very.
Detroit is not a customer base.
There you go. That right. I just got the phone doing a strategy call, and the guy was like talking. I don't know what he was talking about, but I kept asking him like, "Who's going to pay for this? Have you talked to anybody?" He was like, "Well, the banking industry." The banking industry,
The
like
banking
who,
industry.
like who in the banking industry have you talked to that said this is a good idea? And he couldn't answer me. He was just like, "Well, based on the data, it says that this is going to blah 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 blah." It doesn't even matter if, like, in this case, he's like, well, this is a first mover's advantage, right? What he's talking about. It's like, this is such a new idea that they wouldn't know what we were talking about. Even in that situation, you need to go talk to somebody in the banking industry that can say, you know what, that's not a bad idea. But maybe you need to do this or do that, or maybe we're not ready for this yet. But do you have something else? There goes the other problem we have. Maybe work on this, build your credibility up, and then about the time that you come out with this, I think people will be ready for this. I don't know. I just think people are not, in a lot of cases, are not willing to do the hard work up
Yeah.
front of understanding who their customer is. And that's what I do. Big salute out to Tech Town and the customer discovery program. Star Studio Customer Discovery, by the way, it is applications is open right now. This is a
Yes,
free
yes, yes.
advertisement, Tech Town. This free advertisement. And I think, I think people need to do that. And I think Jeseekia, you agree with this. I think if the next set of people that go into the Hacker House in that format, because we have a couple of different formats of the Hacker House, like they need to know they have to go through some level of customer discovery.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So and that's another interesting, just general takeaway. Obviously, the Hacker House is a very particular program, but for us, we're really what we are building, I think, is based around what we really truly see the VCs are saying that they need and are looking for, and the reasons why they're not quite ready to write a check for a lot of ideas. And again, we're really like in that early stage. But it something else that came up that was interesting. You mentioned about some companies will be around for years with before they and still haven't gotten any type of traction with the actual VC. Um and that starts to signal that starts to signal to the VCs like, maybe no, because why have you been around for 3-4 years and you're still not able to develop or hit some type of milestones. So it's kind of interesting because it's like once you start going down that slope, you almost get set on the timer without even really truly realizing it.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember hearing, some of the guys talk from Invest Detroit in particular. Shout out to Invest Detroit. Thank you for sponsoring the Detroit Hacker House.
Yes, yes, yes. We have to
Um,
get them on the show maybe. Next.
yes, for sure. And I think I was listening to Jeff Ponders and Belvin around this, and I mean, I was amazed how quick the timeline is. It's
Mhm.
like, it's almost like within like a year, they actually broke it down. I forget the time frame, so I'm not going to sit here y'all what it was, but it was quick. Like within a year, you should have your first investment. You know what I mean? And I think it's actually 6 months to a year. I think, and things should move pretty fast. So if you're like, working on something and you're telling people about it and it's not picking up traction, that's probably a good signal that you need to pivot,
Yeah.
or you need to go. If you haven't did customer discovery, go do it. Go take the product that you have and actually, show it to them. So there's two parts of customer discovery, right? So there's the whole like going through and doing customer interviews, kind of, interviewing the customer, not letting them know what you're building, right? And then another discovery is when you actually go and show like either a prototype or a wireframe and say, hey, if this was the product, how would you interact with it? Would you use this? And if you already have something, do that part of the customer discovery at least to figure out
Mhm.
what you're missing in the whole thing. I think people are scared to talk to people. I think
Yeah, I was gonna say
fundamentally,
that. I was gonna say that for sure. People
yeah,
people are like, "I
fundamentally.
wanna be a founder, I wanna be a CEO," but, like, there's a lot of responsibilities that you have in coming into that role that I think a lot of people are not mentally prepared for, just kinda jumping in. So, you have this bright idea, but then you realize, like, you have to go out and actually talk to people, ask them about it. There's so many new hats that you have to put on that you probably may have never experienced in whatever previous profession that you have, and that's just a whole personal development thing in and of itself.
Yeah, I think the simplest thing to do is this. If you have an idea, start talking about it. Create yourself a podcast. I know we don't need more podcasts in the world. I know we just started one, but like you you need to um figure out your like mechanism for talking to people. If it's not a podcast, whatever. But if you're like a little like scared to go talk to like humans by yourself, just go start broadcasting it to everybody, and then you'll start getting feedback, and quite honestly it'll help you get to a point that you have a set of followers or people who subscribe to your podcast, which will become kind of like your own little private what's the word I want to say, like market research group that you can use, right?
Yeah.
I think there's many
Well, there's
ways
there's
to get over the
avenues.
fear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because and it depends on where your customer is, right? So, and I've had conversations with a lot of founders over the summer about this, where it's like, just think about where your target customer would actually be. And so sometimes that is a Reddit thread, a Reddit community, that could be a Discord community, that could be, a meetup group. It could be so many of these different little avenues wherever whatever is the typical like conversation forum for your particular user. But ultimately you still have to break down that barrier, like, and I know we're, especially in a post-pandemic world, people don't want to talk to people in real life no more, but that's just that's the nature of wanting to start a company and really truly see it succeed. Going back to that idea of like, the investors are not just like, I feel like a lot of people think that investment is like just this willy-nilly, like throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And it's like, no, an investment is, or a VC investment is like strategic. So they're not just going to go off of anything that you say. You need to show that you're going to actually be able to produce some returns on their investment. Otherwise, there's literally no point in them giving you money.
Yeah, I agree. I think we got a
We
question here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so the King Troop, which is on Twitch, says like, so with that, do you recommend the developer becoming the CEO and hire a CEO?
I don't know. You want me to answer that
Yeah, you
or
can. What's your thoughts on that?
so I think there's a couple of things. I think in the beginning, early on, all right. So I have two different feels about it. So my first thing is that early on, if you are the person who has built this product, I think you need for a short period of time to do everything that's needed within the company, just for a short period of time, just for you to understand what you like, what you don't like, understand all aspects of the business. And then I do think that you should probably bring on a CEO at some point, and that will allow and free you up to continue doing the development if that's what you want to do. Because this development, software development, is a creative process. Shout out to Dave Weber. Me and him were talking one day. I was saying, man, why don't you code more? He's like, man, it's a creative process. And I'm like, shit, you're right. It is a creative process. So I think if you don't want to be interrupted by the day-to-day activities, um, down the road, I think you definitely should have a CEO that's there. Now, um, my other side of me thinking around this is that bringing in someone as a CEO, you have to really ensure that you and that person is on the same page. Like if you can't find anybody that's on the same page, I would not settle for any person to be your CEO because it is like a marriage. So I would prefer a founder to stay a solo founder until they're able to find the right person. And sometimes it's not a CEO, it's just maybe it's a key first hire that it becomes maybe your president of the company or some other part of the company
Yeah.
in the beginning. It probably more importantly, a somebody who can run sales and marketing is probably more important than a CEO in the beginning.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I agree with what you're saying because you do need to understand where you really what role do you really want to take on in the company. And I think a lot of times, especially since we are leaning into that supporting of like the technical founder, obviously a lot of people want to default to CTO, but you might want to be that lead for your company, at least in the beginning. So it's something, but just more so the fact that you have to actually sit down and understand that for yourself. You can't really just, I think some people want to hold on to the CEO title because of you know the caliber of it or whatever, but that's a lot of responsibility, like you said, because as a CEO you need to actually be making sure the company's moving forward, not necessarily be the one that is super in the weeds on the technical side. And even as a CTO, you still have to be at a high level. You still have to be thinking about strategy, and you can't just be like, oh, you know what, I just want to build in the fanciest framework just because this is the newest thing that's coming out. And it's like, yeah, but it's going to take like way more capacity. You won't be able to find any developers because you want to pick some niche tool to use. And ultimately even slowing down the process of, if getting back to that MVP, like slowing down the process of actually getting those target features out to your customers and seeing, are they willing to pay for it. That's what our focus is in trying to get to as soon as possible. I know it was quite a bit to that specific question. We do have one more question, but I don't know. It's just so interesting. I'm enjoying this process, if nothing else. I think because we've been doing this for quite a while now, and we've seen a lot of different founders coming through. And then, of course, like I mentioned, we're in the Midwest, so we have this like different perspective that's based off of, it's a lot more risk averse here than it may be some other places as well. So sometimes we're getting people coming in and they're used to, how things are done on the coast. And it's like, no, you need an MVP around here. Like you need to prove that you have some type of validation to your business model. Otherwise, they're most likely not going to invest.
Yeah, absolutely. And here goes the other thing too. The VCs will like for you to have a partner. I mean, they prefer, it to be two or more people on the founding team, simply because if they give the money to just a solo founder and that solo founder, God forbid, get hit by a bus, then obviously their investment is gone. At least if you had two people, someone can carry the ball forward. Now, however, I don't want you to get caught up in that though, because it's like marrying again, back to relationships. It's like if you hurry up and marry somebody because your parents or some other pressures are on you and you find the wrong person or you marry the wrong person, I mean, it's very hard to untangle that, right? It's very costly to untangle that. It's the same thing inside of a company. So I know, VCs will put pressure on it and say the best practice is for you to have a co-founder. Right. This really take your time to find that founder. And on top of that, um, the pushback to the VCs wanting that is revenue. If you be able to say, hey, I got this revenue running this company by myself, I think I can afford running without a co-founder for a period of time until I find the right person because I'm able to generate revenue. That's a totally different conversation and push you into a position where you're not so much pressed to find a co-founder.
Yeah, I mean, it's really good what you mentioned about, like you said, especially if you're technical in the beginning, take that time, do as many of the things as you can, be involved as many of the things as you can, so that you know when you are going to look for a co-founder, what are the skills that you're actually needing. You need to find complementary skills.
Oh yeah, I like that part. So, uh, Vizzy the visionary, when it comes to making an MVP, what is the best way to get your product out to customers to try, as well as just bringing up the ideas to customers and people seeing if the idea itself is something you should pursue to create an MVP? I don't know. You want to try that one, Jessica?
Okay, so we got the best way to get your product out to customers, and then bringing up the ideas to customers to see. Okay, so I think it just depends on your particular customer, but I can give some examples. So, for example, well, I think our first stance is when it comes to the best way to get the product out, we believe in the MVP. So, what is the most after you do customer discovery should be a process of you going out and being able to interview your customer, your target customer, and figuring out exactly what are the pain points that they are experiencing so that whatever solution you're building for is something that they actually have a need for. When you develop that MVP based on those core features, like you're trying to get it back in their hands as quickly as possible. So MVP itself is really an iterative process. Like, let's build the most basic thing based on the customer said they need a way to really quickly swap from this mode to that mode on their phone. Okay, cool. We're going to come and build that one feature, put it in their hands, and our approach to that typically is no code. Now that's like a whole fight and battle in and of itself that we have to go through with some people. But truly, truly, I think if you have no product, that's kind of where we start. Build the most basic idea as an MVP. But then the idea of bringing up the idea, like bringing up stuff to the customer, like I gave examples, like, so, if you know that you're the person, here's an example, this company wants to build a device that's going to be allowing you to have access to Wi-Fi when you're out on camping trips or when you're off the grid or whatever the case may be, right? So who is your customer and where would they be? I'm like, I'm not that fancy when it comes to outdoors, but the first thing I think about is like Dunham's or Dick's Sporting Goods or like these Target stores where that your customer is going to be the rock climbing gyms where there's lots of people that like to go out. They probably do outdoor climbing, things like that, right? Getting into the mind of who the customer is and really thinking about the natural places you would find them. When I was in college, we took an anthropology class, and I thought it was so weird at the time, but our goal was to get on a elevator in a tall build like office building and just ride the elevator and observe people. It was super awkward, but again, it was like that's what it reminds me of. It's like I have to go into the environment with the customer I'm looking for. So we talked about some online forums earlier, like if they are on Reddit, you probably can find Reddit posts and things. So you're going to places where you can naturally dialogue with them, and that makes it easier to just bring up the ideas that you want to try out and see how people respond without giving them, hey, here's the product that I'm going to build. Because a lot of times you will tell somebody like, hey, I'm going to build this thing. They might say, yeah, that sounds good, but ultimately it doesn't really do anything for them. When you go to those natural environments where you can just have a conversation with them, if I'm in the Dick's Sporting Goods and I see people looking for communication devices at then I can have more natural conversation with them and find out what kind of devices do they typically use, what kind of issues do they typically run into. I know that's a little long-winded, but that's my perspective on that question, at least.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead on. I mean, inside of inside of Tech Town, we have people all the time trying to figure this whole thing out. And I think the real comes down to is what you said is really getting in the environment. In some cases, you posing as right for the same type of product, right? So I had a founder that was trying to build like a universal adapter for power tools. All the power tools you got I don't know what's walkie, and then you have DWAT. They all have their own power like supplies, right? That pop into interchangeable power supplies. So he was trying to build something that was universal, very much like a universal charger
Hmm.
um, type of deal, right? Um, so he went to Home Depot, and it took a while to get there, but we go to Home Depot and he just went in the aisles and went to the aisles where all the rechargeable packs are and just started posing as a customer. And then, he'll be like, yeah, I'm just sitting here looking for, a rechargeable battery, blah, 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 something that's interchangeable and all that good stuff. And then the person that was there to buy the DeWalt charger, he'll start saying, yeah, man, that would be a great idea because I'm in here and these chargers. If I lose the charger, I have to come here and buy a whole brand new charger. It would be great if maybe I just had an adapter that I could take a charger from my Milwaukee, put an
Hmm.
adapter on it, and plug it into my DeWalt. That. So he was like, okay. So that's how he was able to like figure out what the demand is for it. It's just sometimes you just by posing as a customer because you don't have like all the things that go along with like asking people like questions, right? Because they feel like they're getting sold to, right? So
Yeah. Or
so
you're like
so
straight up
people,
interviewing them, awkward random person coming up to interview them while they're like, yeah, no.
yeah, yeah, you want their guard is down for you can get the most unfiltered, truthful answer. Because if you get a whole bunch of filtered answers, that means the product that you're creating is not going to be at its truest form. It's going to be filtered, and so it's not going to be as impactful. So I
Yeah.
definitely think figuring out where those people live and going to those places is the ideal thing to do.
Yeah. And another thing I would just add on to that is that be careful with your inner circle, like wanting to overly like you vet your idea against people that know you and care about you and love you because if they're not your target customer, even if they have the most well-meaning intentions, typically they do. That's just like a skewed view of what you should actually be building, so you can't really get around the talking to the actual people, which are possibly going to be strangers. But what I do recommend is like getting recommendations from your network. So if you don't know anybody that's already into that specific thing that you think your customer is into, maybe somebody that you know is willing to recommend you to other folks that they know around them. But yeah, don't rely on that. You got to get out there and talk to people.
And no, this is good. And then I think we're actually over our 30 minutes. We said we were going to do it for 30 minutes, but this
We
has been
did.
so good. But it's been good. But this to wrap up and kind of talk about like what our vision is for this podcast is what we're doing now, talking about all the things that are popping up in our day-to-day lives. So Jeseekia and I are actively talking to founders, actively doing programs. So we're gonna have things that for in some cases, this is just gonna be a way for us to decompress and this and this rant on some of the things that we've saw and hopefully bring some value to the conversation, because I think one of the conversations that we really need to jump into at maybe we do this in our next week is really talk about the tooling that
Hmm.
that that people select for their MVP. And we use Adalo a lot, but it's not necessarily, you know, it has quirks, it has issues, it has problems, but at the root of it, it is trying to get to the point where you're able to take your product and put it in front of somebody. So I'll leave
Yeah.
it there with that. But I think that's for me, next week is something that I would love to dig into. So how about you, Jessica, and close us out from there?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. My big thing that I definitely want us to dive into is following on from that. What is the real, true like mindset of the development side when it comes to MVPs, right? If you are a technical founder and you're used to being an individual contributor, this is a very different lifestyle for you. You may have never been involved in product development. You may have never been involved in the customer relationships and how those products and those different features actually came to life and were prioritized. So, I think when we do our training, I think a lot about shaping the mindset of the MVP developer, which is a little bit more of them starting to lean into like a CTO type of identity. So that's something I look forward to us discussing as well. I think the first episode, this is really good. So we are going to be rebroadcasting this episode on YouTube tomorrow. But we do have a YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/at MVP developer. So that is where we will be going live from here on out. So if you ever want to catch another episode, we'll be live at noon Eastern time on Thursdays, and then you'll be able to go back on the YouTube channel as well and catch the replay if you want to see any more content. And then we have training and things like that, so we'll also be putting a lot more of that material out on that channel as well. So I would encourage you all to go ahead and follow us there. And then in the meantime, if you are looking to get involved with us, feel free to reach out, whether it's on LinkedIn, on any other social media platforms that you know us on, or come for the next show, because I think we have a lot in store for you all, and we'll be doing these weekly for the time being.
Cool. All right. See y'all next week.
All right, episode 1 done.
For sure.